the sign, okay?
Great. Good morning, everybody. I'm Shannon Hayter. I'm the Dean of the School of International Service at American University, and we are thrilled to have you all join us today. This is a very special event made possible by many players within our school, including the Transatlantic Policy Center, the Department of Foreign Policy and Global Security, and the Department of Politics, Governance, and Economics. So it really is my pleasure to welcome you here for this event with Deputy Prime Minister for European and Euro-Atlantic Integration in Ukraine, Olha Stefanishyna. Today is a particularly symbolic day for this webinar. We are especially grateful that the Deputy Prime Minister could take time to be with us soon after the 2-year anniversary of the invasion of Ukraine by Russia, to share where Ukraine is now and where it could be with closer ties to Europe. We also remember that it was a decade ago, nearly to the day, that Russia pursued its illegal annexation of Crimea. We can't gather today without recognizing the tremendous struggles and sacrifices and sustained efforts of the past 2 years. And for those of you who happen to be in our SIS building here in DC, please do go through the atrium and see the photo display that was brought together by Ukrainian student and Fulbright student Anna Stadilko, and I know our Ukrainian Student Association has also been through to be part of the viewing. It's really meaningful that this event takes place on International Women's Day, when we recognize the contributions of women from all over the world, including the work of our guest on gender equality policies. So a little bit more about our guest. The Deputy Prime Minister has held her current position since June 2020. She is a lawyer with over 15 years of experience in national and EU law. She started her career in the Ministry of Justice of Ukraine and served as Director General in the Government Office for Coordination of European and Euro-Atlantic Integration of Ukraine. The Deputy Prime Minister has been instrumental in the negotiations leading to the EU decision to open accession talks with Ukraine in 2023. And in her role, she oversees reforms in the security and defense sectors due to NATO principles and standards. Her work prioritizes integrating and elevating gender equality in state policies, with a special focus on gender-based violence and domestic violence. She has a much longer CV than that and has also received many prestigious awards, including the State Order of Merit degree by the President of Ukraine in 2023, the Liberal Award as an Outstanding Changemaker by the European Liberal Forum in 2022, and a Woman for Peace and Security Award by the NATO Parliamentary Assembly in 2022. Now, this session today, we will go quickly to opening remarks by the Deputy Prime Minister, followed by a moderated Q&A session by Ambassador Pipel Campbell and Professor Michelle Egan. So, Deputy Prime Minister, thank you so much for being here today, and I hand the floor over to you.
Thank you so much, Shannon. It's a great pleasure to see many participants who are joining us today. I'm really sorry that we're not able to have this meeting and this discussion and this exchange in person. I promised that the other day I will make it in person to Washington DC, and we will have a broader, longer, and more detailed discussion. But at this stage, it's very important for me that we can have this discussion today, because on my side, it's really important to bring the real understanding and the reality infield in Ukraine, but also the European perspective of the state of play. On the other side, it's very important for me to have the exchange and to hear the feedback from the participants, the students, and the colleagues from the university in terms of the understanding of the war situation in Ukraine, the reform effort Ukraine is undertaking throughout the war, but also a broader geopolitical landscape and the ways towards restoring a global order. So I thank you all again for organizing this discussion and for making it available and public, and making sure that whatever messages which could help us to be instrumental in terms of making a vital decision by US Congress this year, but also in a broader geopolitical agenda. They will be used over this discussion today. So, with that regard, I really want to bring ourselves into understanding that the war which is now taking place in Ukraine, it should not be evaluated by the titles in the highlights or by the way it is highlighted in the media. The war is raging on for 2 years in a row, and it's a full scale and gradual acceleration of aggression since 2014. Starting from the annexation of Crimea, as Shan has mentioned as well. So the war is raging on. The massive civilian atrocities are continuing to take place, and occupied territories of Ukraine are still in active fight, and people are still held hostages on this occupied territories without basically ability even to use the instrument of the green corridors to release. So it's a human tragedy which is continuing on a daily basis, and the dynamics of which is not scaling up. It's only changing, but it's still a massive, full-scale, atrocious war which is targeted to make Ukraine not exist as a nation, as a country, and basically it's the war which makes a weapon of war the human life, the life of civilian people, the civilian population, the massive tortures, massive sexual assault and different crimes which are used as the instruments of war. And this is the reality in a film. It's my greatest pleasure to give you the understanding that I'm able to sit here in front of you because we are able to secure air capacity and secure our sky from a massive missile attacks which are taking place on a regular, almost daily basis throughout the territory of Ukraine. This reality and this resilience, of course, should not be taken for granted, as we're at the edge of failure to make a decision of on military support by US Congress. This reality could change very fast, and even within the next month, as we will not be in a capacity to ensure the security of the elements of the critical infrastructure, ensure the functional operation of institutions, and securing the sky, and which means that it would only be in a position to leading to more and more atrocities amongst civilians. And of course, it's an enormously frustrating task. At the same time, we are, as you see, mobilizing the all-European effort to build bigger and stronger capability in terms of mobilizing military support to Ukraine, but also building more stronger, capable European bond of defense within North Atlantic Treaty Organization, within NATO. And it requires time. And given the very unexpected deliverables in terms of passing the decision in US Congress, it was such a short notice that we were not able, and we are not able physically to change the reality in terms of the proportion of the military capability between US and European allies within one night, which directly affects to the situation on the battlefield. So it's vital to have this decision of the US Congress for this year, with additional roadmap of the next strategic actions and priorities, which could be, to our understanding, enshrined in the new Euro-Atlantic Pact, which could be agreed over the NATO Washington summit, which will take place just in a couple of months in the Washington DC, marking the 75th anniversary of the alliance. This is a tactical, the agenda in a field, but I think that while the war is raging on and we're really marking the second year of our daily reality of the wartime, we also see that the strategic understanding and the strategic narrative is really changing. It's very clear to us here in Ukraine and in Europe, I would say, that the aggression of the Russian Federation does not has against Ukraine has a very, very specific nature, because it's not the territorial claims. It's aggression against the order. It's aggression against the rule. It's aggression against the major principle that pacta sunt servanda, right? That the treaties should be implemented and the agreements should be stick to. It's a aggression against the world order we were able to build since the end of the Second World War. And unfortunately, this aggression is taking place on the territory of Ukraine. And I think that this understanding has always been there, but now there is a clear understanding that this aggression should be stopped, and it should be stopped should be stopped in Ukraine. Otherwise, it will spread to the NATO borders and the NATO countries. And in fact, it's only Ukrainian cities small cities of Kupiansk and Avdiivka who are making now the decision where the aggression is spread, how close the aggression is to the NATO borders. And it's also the decision of the allies, the NATO allies in particular, to help us identify together that this aggression is not coming to the NATO border. This aggression is ended in Ukraine, but also ending this aggression and ending the war and restoration of the world order and restoration of the territorial integrity of Ukraine, ensuring the justice and accountability for the crimes. This is the only way which will not allow us to wake up in the morning when the Russian, Iranian, North Korean alliance will prevail and will see that this aggression is justified. So, and we also see that the huge difference in the American narrative, of course, it's a bit fueled now with a very emotional discussions between different party groups in terms of the bills to be passed. But if just a year ago, the major message we heard from the American colleagues from the State Department that the major support of the United States is targeted to help Ukraine keep on fighting. So today the narrative is absolutely different. Today we see that there's a clear, very white and black understanding that the war should be stopped in Ukraine. Otherwise, it will only serve this prosperous development of the autocratic alliances, but also legitimize the aggression, but also very pragmatically lead to the war at the territory of NATO. So, we understand that this is a rather important strategic development, and we're sure that as a result of it, Ukraine will definitely overcome the aggression. Ukraine will restore its territorial integrity and sovereignty. Ukraine will become a member of European Union, and Europe will bring its sovereign European defense bond. And the major task for us is to survive throughout this time. We're surviving as a nation. Our unity is very strong. It's unbreakable, I would say. We are also concentrating our efforts over transformation and building more resilient and more resilience and integrity in terms of public administration, and making the country more capable and more attractive in terms of recovery and investments. But at the same time, we understand that this is the moment which requires a strong concentration, strong mobilization, and strong unity. And it will not have any importance if Ukraine is not capable in this particular moment of time to protect its citizens, to shield the cities with air defense, and to fight back the attacks and massive one-way manpower land attacks of the Russian Federation. So in that regard, there might be more strategic and philosophical discussion. There is a huge geopolitical shift which is taking place right now, and democratic allies definitely understand a bigger picture of actions needed to make sure that the rules-based order prevails. At the same time, all of these discussions are taken from the understanding that Ukraine's resilience and resolve is unprecedented. At the same time, it should not be taken for granted. And to make sure that we're capable of securing and shielding our ways of life, our democratic ways of life, our values, our normal coexistence between different nations in the world is not possible by providing Ukraine with the instruments enabling us to secure ourselves and fight back and defend our territories. So, in that regard, it's very clear what my main message. We really do our best to serve the strategic agenda and make sure that we take all the necessary global decisions to secure our world order, our democratic order, and to leave no room for autocracies and blunt aggression to be justified and prosper. At the same time, this a part of strategic issues requires a daily decisions. We do it in Ukraine as much as we can, but we cannot survive. Our resilience cannot be taken for granted, as it is vital to have it with the support of the allies. I will stop here and will be really, really happy to have the exchange with the colleagues and participants.
Thank you so much, Deputy Prime Minister. My name is Piper Campbell. I am one of the two women on our fanel. And initially I thought that a fanel meant people who are fans or supporters of Ukraine, but I was told that in fact a fanel is a female-only panel, which we are holding, among other things, to mark and celebrate International Women's Day. And so I want to thank you so much for your opening remarks and for the framing and for the frankness and the range of issues which you've covered, which I know are going to excite our students and our listeners. And I expect to see questions pouring into the Q&A. So just for our listeners, you will see at the bottom of your screen a button that says Q&A. You can click that, please, and start to frame your questions. And Professor Michelle Egan, who represents the Department of Politics, Government, and Economics at American University, and me representing the Foreign Policy and Global Security Department, we will be incorporating questions from the audience along with our own questions. You gave me a lovely framing for my first question, and I want to be positive, and I want to imagine and think about this better future that we know is coming. A better future for Ukraine and a better future for Ukraine, which is more solidly ensconced within European institutions. So let me ask, what would Ukraine bring to European and transatlantic institutions, more approximately the European Union, of course, but also possibly over time, NATO, as part of a successful diplomatic process of accession and enlargement?
Thank you so much. And indeed, it's International Women's Day today, and this is also part of my portfolio. And I really can endlessly speak about the challenges we face where gender equality agenda is not on the front line. It's just the surviving and facing the challenges of being a woman throughout the war are enormous, and I really will be happy to engage in more detailed discussion on that. But anyway, this is our uniform. This is how Ukrainian women look. You know, the harder you feel, the better you look, because you have to show your strength through being capable to take care of yourself. And this is a very interesting angle from the Ukrainian society. At the same time, this a very important question, both from the very different perspectives of EU and NATO, But on EU, it's much more clear. Ukraine is the largest market, which is outside of European Union. And basically, with Ukraine as part of the EU single market, European Union becomes the largest global market and the most attractive market. Ukraine is also a country. There will be challenges related to the rural area and the agricultural policy, but at the same time, Ukraine brings the traditional markets for agricultural products, which are not very much, let's say, accessible to European Union because of various regulations and etc. And there's a huge interest in that. Ukraine also enjoys different trade arrangements with Great Britain, which are a bit of unique. So we will also bring this expertise and this co-production capacities we're building in that. So from the economic perspective, this is a huge added value which Ukraine brings to the benefit of the EU single market. Of course, it will require quite a time to fit in, right? It's just like it's a huge benefit, but it would require sort of adjustment and transition as well. So at the same time, Ukraine's accession to European Union will complete the Eastern European bit of the European enlargement, and it would only capture Eastern Europe complete as part of European Union, as part of the policy making process. And this is from a very pragmatic point of view, but from the purely humane point of view, you can hardly find more European hearts than those which are in Ukraine. And for Ukrainians, when you speak about the European values and the values of dignity, right, this is not the words. This is not something we got used to. We're fighting for that. That's why it's very fresh in our hearts. And this is a fresh and new energy we're going to bring to EU. And Ukraine has been a pioneer of reforms and transformations for quite a number of years, not even speaking that it was Ukraine who revived the whole enlargement policy, which was dead basically before Ukraine applied to membership. So that's very clear. And in fact, for us, it's not something, it's coming back to a family of European nations. It's just restoring our like European belongingness and etc. So that's kind of natural process, and it's not questioned from this perspective. It's only questioned from the perspective of the market compliance. But I think that this has been already very vividly seen and understood that this is a huge asset the European single market gains within the continent, and this is the only one left not gained by European Union, not absorbed by European Union economy. Of course, it's very important that you're mentioning the Euro-Atlantic angle. Basically, Ukraine's armed forces, even in the time of the full-scale war, are ranked as the 18th largest firepowers in the world. Only 5 NATO allies ahead of us is the United States, United Kingdom, France, and nuclear states. So I think it's very clear from that perspective. And basically, Ukraine's membership to NATO, I think, is the major security guarantee both for Ukraine, but also for Russia. Not speaking about the capability and the marvelous experience and the capacity of Ukrainian armed forces to apply the most innovative ways of a hybrid and conventional wartime, which are not available to any army in the world, including the Russian ones, not speaking about the NATO ones.
Thank you so much. And I am very pleased to see that we have questions pouring in from the audience, including 2 that were directly focused on the agricultural policy challenges or space specifically of EU accession. And so I'm going to sort of try to combine 2 of those, which were asking about how agricultural policy may be a challenge for Ukraine as it navigates the EU accession process, and more specifically, tensions over grain markets between Poland and Ukraine. So I wonder if you could speak to your thinking, Ukraine's thinking about how Ukraine can approach or assuage the potential market fears?
Yeah, thank you. That's been a very, very important question in our bilateral relations with Ukraine and Poland, but in the larger framework of the European Union. At this point of time, the tensions are being really decreasing. And we see that the Polish government is handling well its domestic protests, and the agenda of the agricultural process is now much wider than only the Ukrainian grain exports. And we also see the massive agricultural, wave of activities around different capitals. So the agenda is much broader. Ukraine has chosen a very clear path to stick only to a legal solution, as we're heading over to the accession talks, as the EU single market is managed from Brussels by European Commission to ensure that there is a balance between interests of all the member states. So we cannot really step into individual discussions with Poland and put in an unequal position, for example, Romania, Hungary, Slovakia, or Bulgaria. So this is something that should be managed by European Commission, but we did what we could. And I think that this has been a major step on Ukrainian side. First, we secured the Black Sea corridor, which enabled the release of the grain products through the sea, and which significantly decreased the pressure to the Polish border. We also invested heavily in developing the Danube channel of exportation, which also decreased the pressure. And we also have been in a constructive dialogue with Hungary and Romania and Bulgaria as well, and Lithuania and Netherlands in terms of building the capacity on releasing the export, including development of the border crossing infrastructure, the checks on the borders, and etc. Which means that we have taken away the tension from the market. We have restricted the grain exports to Poland by ensuring the exports control and licensing. So now it's purely political and domestic issue in Poland, and I'm sure that we will be able to find a common solution and a common ground on that. We have already undertaken the obligation that Ukrainian producers will ensure the fast-track legal approximation. We will ensure the fast-track legal approximation for our agricultural producers, so to put them in more equal conditions with the producers from the European Union. And this is like our re-approachment to the situation. So we see that it's evolving in a good direction. And on 28th or 28th of March, Prime Minister Shmyhal, Ukrainian Prime Minister, and Polish Prime Minister would have a joint meetings of the governments where we will hopefully seal the deal on this issue and continue.
Thank you for really emphasizing both the NATO and the European angle. I work on single markets, so this was to my heart. But I'm going to really shift the debate and the question. Last night at the State of the Union, President Biden talked about freedom and democracy, and he talked about it at home and abroad. And Ukraine was central to the initial message. So for people on the call, how can supporters of Ukraine effectively counter some of that fatigue and really support what you called was your resilience? What ways can we channel that help, particularly as we're here in Washington?
Thank you so much. I'd rather address this question to you so that you could give me advice how to address it in Washington, because basically my major understanding that if I were the American, I would be watching the war. This is the overseas war to the United States, whether it's Ukraine or any other part of the world. It's the overseas wars. So, but I've been already mentioning that this war is not about the territories. It's not about the historical territorial conflict. It's the war against the rules and the order, which are common in every part of the world. So, and the difference is that the Americans, they are watching the war and we are living in the war. Although we share the same democratic bond, we share the same fascinating, great lives in our country, which we love the most, which we didn't want to leave, where we built our homes, families, and made the reforms happen and make it enshrining everything we do into making country more strong, more democratic, and into standing for the revolution of dignity for European choice. And now this country, which is just the same, is at war. The bombs are falling down our heads. Our kids are sleeping in the garages and parkings and the shelters, and this is the reality in Ukraine. But the reality for all of us is that if Ukraine falls, then everybody will fall. That the chaos that is going to start will not be able to be manageable. It means that we're waking up in a world when the aggression is legitimized, when the sexual assault, tortures, massive murders of civilians, of the people, of the children are legitimate. The blunt overnight aggression is legitimate, and that it has been long time to start the autocratic alliances because they are stronger, they are more capable. For example, Russia has managed to procure from the North Korea the amount of artillery which all European Union were not able to provide Ukraine for the whole year. So this is a strategic victory. This is something that we cannot we can't unsee and unfeel. So I would be also happy to hear from you whether it's something that echoes in your reality, in your daily life, or not.
And I think your comment earlier about this notable shift in the American narrative, which we did definitely hear last night in the President's State of the Union, this shift to a recognition that this challenge is addressed in Ukraine or is addressed elsewhere, right? It's not a challenge which goes away. We've received two questions that really look at the question that, in essence, asks the question of how Ukraine continues to develop as a country while simultaneously prosecuting this war. One of the questions is related to Ukraine's ongoing efforts to eliminate corruption. And another question is related to democratic oversight over special services reform, over other aspects of necessary and ongoing reform. And just to sort of combine the two questions, which I think would be, what actions can the government take, is the government taking in those areas now? How do improvements in those areas tie to issues like EU accession? And how do you manage to balance what needs to be done in terms of prosecuting the war against what needs to be done in all these other areas?
Thank you so much. In fact, a rule of law is the major condition for everything related to our European process and European integration. And it's not only about the legal acts or implementing actions to be taken. There should be a feeling and a trust and a bond between what is said, what is seen, and what is in the field. So it's a key priority for us at this point of time. We have targeted our efforts in 2022 and first part of 2023 to make sure that the proper institutional framework is set up. This institutional framework is formed and enforced through making sure that it complies with the highest criteria of integrity and trust. So we did it. We have established a full spectrum of anti-corruption bodies, from investigation to court proceedings. We have relaunched fully the judicial sector, made sure that the disciplinary council and the selection procedures are done together with the majority of international experts on board. We have also reboosted the reform of the Constitutional Court of Ukraine, which is the major body, which has enormous power to, let's say, manage all the legal framework in Ukraine. So we made sure that these institutions are capable of becoming fully operational, and that the major task politically, which has been set out in front of them, to ensure the proper track record. And we see basically dozens and dozens of cases which has been considered by the courts, which the decisions taken by the courts and the convictions. It shows that the process is really going. For us, it's very important politically. For us as politicians, it's very important in Ukraine, because to survive, Ukraine has to mobilize unprecedented amount of financial resources to ensure covering the shortages in liquidity through the budget. But also it would be tens and tens times more resources needed to recover after the war, to restore. And we are working on management also the Russian frozen assets. And this mobilization requires trust, requires transparency, requires integrity. So it's very important for us that all of these institutions are functioning, it's visible, and there is a trust in them. At the same time, I'm really happy that Vilnius Summit of NATO has become a booster of reforms in security and defense sector. And for Washington Summit of NATO, we are preparing the roadmap of interoperability criteria in terms of reforms needed to be compatible with the NATO standards policies. And we are working on that right now. The key bond of that is civilian democratic oversight over the armed forces. Soon, I'm sure the parliament will consider an appropriate piece of legislation. So basically, this reforms agenda is very much proactively moved in Ukraine from the strategic point of view, but also from the tactical one, because basically, learning from the centuries of Ukrainian history, we had never managed to defend our sovereignty and independence because we were fighting hard, but we failed in a strategic perspective, and that's why we were absorbed by the empire, by the Soviet Union as well. And in that regard, investing in the strategic development of the Ukrainian armed forces and security sector is priority to us. So we are working on building more transparency and integrity in defense procurement system, building more operational and manageable system of general staff and the armed forces. So this is all in a pipeline, and the major importance for us is that is done together with allies already, even at this stage and every step of the way. So it's not only about investing into military and financial support of Ukraine, it's also contributing to joint efforts to develop and evolve throughout the war.
That was just an enormously comprehensive answer, linking both financial reform and economic governance reform to both NATO and European enlargement. It was what we wanted to do today, forward-looking. And while you're in the midst of war, I'd like to sort of ask the question about, the EU did something unprecedented, which is provided temporary protection status to Ukrainians who fled Ukraine. And so I wanted to ask, what are the discussions, given this huge, massive displacement of population who've gone primarily to other parts of Europe? What are the sort of questions, discussions within Ukraine about will Ukrainians return home, and how will the displacement, this massive displacement of population, what are you thinking in terms of addressing it to bring Ukrainians back home?
Yes, I think there is something I'm gonna say which might not be very nice for the American ears to hear, is that basically we're not able to give any communication to our citizens which have fled and escaped the war and went abroad, because we are not in a position to communicate that we're able to secure the skies and secure them from the massive missile attacks to all the cities around all the territory of Ukraine. Because it's simply something that we're not confident in, because we do not have a clarity on the early planned military support to be provided by the United States, and this gap could not be, covered by other partners in a short period of time. So basically, there is like zero communication we can provide to our citizens who are abroad. At the same time, we have a very, detailed communication with the European Union, and there is like a number of points that, as long as the war is raging on, Ukrainians should have the right to have this temporary protection, because the dynamics is really different from region to region. For example, from Kharkiv region, this dynamics is very different. Some regions were more secure, now they are less secure. The same in Odessa, the same in Mykolaiv and others. So we cannot deprive Ukrainians from the right to seek the shelter and temporary protection. Although the modification of that could be different, in fact, Ukrainians are extremely educated and professional nation. And most of the people were capable, were not able, to sit and wait. They needed to be active. They wanted to engage into EU labor market, including US, I'm sure. So there might be a timeline set specifically for those people who are seeking for this temporary protection. The cooling period of 1 year, when all the necessary social packages have been assured, and then if person decides to stay, it should have a bit more obligations in terms of employment, residential permission, etc. But in that understanding, we also look in a more far-reaching perspective that when Ukraine will become member of European Union, we all will be European citizens. And it's not a very long period of time. It's just a couple of years. So we really have to balance between these two understanding, and the dialogue is there.
You referred to sort of a closer term, but then a more far-reaching, thinking further forward. And we've got two questions which kind of touch on both of those aspects. One more specific is sort of when do you expect to gain the negotiation framework from the European Commission? So when do you actually expect? Do you have any sense of when the next immediate step is likely to occur? And then looking a little further forward, one of our participants asked about the Ukrainian perspective on the European Green Deal. So again, recognizing that there's so many immediate issues on your plate to be considered, but at the same time, we also need to be thinking about the future, right? And addressing these questions around what do we hope for the future to look like.
Thank you. The negotiation framework is to be adopted by European Commission next Tuesday, which is like 12th of March. And we're looking forward for that. I've made a million of phone calls to different ministers and everybody I could reach out. I did, including the discussions the president had and various people from our team. So we're really waiting for this decision to be taken on Tuesday, on 12th of March. The other question was about what? The second part of the
European Green Deal. So the
deal. I thought, yes, this is definitely. I've been dealing with this area of my competence before the full-scale war, and Ukraine has been pioneering the green transition as the major driver of economy and investments. At the same time, the war has dramatically changed the landscape, and I, as a chief negotiator, I have been identifying the green transition and the climate part is the hardest part of the negotiation process, because at the same time, Ukraine have to combine the green agenda with the reality in the field and the necessity to ensure the fast recovery. And this should be also a green-oriented process. So, but in that regard, I'm really, if I may say so, grateful from the personal pragmatic perspective. I'm grateful to our Polish colleagues, because they now have made a deal, and Prime Minister Tusk is to announce it on sort of a transition period or a derogation from sort of an obligations under the Green Deal due to the consequences of the full-scale war to Poland, which is also a instruction for us, a framework for us. So now I feel that this burden for us is a bit lessened, because we would have the example which is already taking place in Poland. So it would be quite a challenge. Although politically we have declared a very ambitious climate goal in terms of CO2 emissions reduction, in terms of aligning ourselves with the principles of the Paris Agreement and many other elements. But we really need to reinvent ourselves in that reality and combine it with the ability to align ourselves with this agenda throughout the war.
I'm wondering if I can ask a question you've brought up gender, but mostly in terms of gender violence, and this is International Women's Day. And one of my colleagues has indicated that Ukraine has made a lot of advances in promoting gender equality, ratifying the Istanbul Convention. So what role do you see Ukraine playing in the European community advancing gender equality? You know, and especially as, you know, we're on this panel, and I really would like you to sort of emphasize, you know, on the one hand, we're seeing these atrocities, gender violence, gender-based violence, but on the other hand, looking forward, could it be possible that given Ukraine's experience as an educated population, as a mobile population, as people in government like yourself, as diplomats, what can you bring in terms of gender equality?
It's a very complicated question. Like ourselves, I guess we can bring ourselves, but it's really, I've never been looking into this from this kind of angles, and at the same time, there is already a number of very unique set and rather positive experiences Ukraine has, and it's only for now 62,000 of women serving in the armed forces. This is the huge new reality from the perspective of from feminine angle of the security and defense sector. It applies to everything, to integration of gender approaches into the military service, military education, daily life, procurement, and whatever. There's like thousands and thousands of elements which should be taken into account when it comes to a gender balance in this area. At the same time, we have been joining all the coalitions on cutting up the gender pay gap. And this has been a very important element in Ukraine, because with the beginning of the war, namely, many men has started their life as a serviceman. They joined the army, they joined the territorial defense. So the women have to step in to keep the country running and to keep the economy running. And all of these initiatives, like cutting the gender pay gap, also giving the access to all the professions, they've become so relevant. And this was not the question whether there is a consensus or there's no consensus to do it. It should have been done to survive. So it has been a vital element. But also the other very sad experience we have is that there's been so many crimes against women's children and elderly people committed by Russian army on the occupied territories. And this has been such a brutal and awful sexual assault. It was a massive raping, and this was at least recognized at the level of the UN, that this as a weapon of war. This is an instrument of war. This is an instrument of demoralizing the population, the barbarian, the Middle Age instrument. But Ukraine has been strong here. We have shown a really big solidarity, and we have opened the survivors response centers throughout the country. And it's just the Monday this week that we started to grant temporary reparations to those who faced the sexual violence, thus making sure that this is the first step to justice, and that they feel that they're on the way to justice. So in that regard, we have a lot of experience to share. We have a lot of legislation in place, and we have joined every international instrument available. And the major breakthrough was, of course, with the ratification of the Istanbul Convention by Ukrainian Parliament. We have a very orthodox parliament with very conservative, and there was a attempt to make this ratification for almost a decade, and 3 convocations of Ukrainian parliament were not able to do it. But the sense of solidarity was there at the moment that it has taken place. So we're learning from the best practices, but we are also the source of the new instruments which are effective.
Minister, Deputy Minister, we have had such a great conversation. I see wonderful questions in the chat. We could continue this for another hour, but I wanted to note that one of the participants said, "I see so many Ukrainian flags in my neighborhood, and there are so many in the United States who feel very deeply for Ukraine and for Ukrainians." And I think it's conversations like this one. It's you bringing yourself, as you just said, that really helps people to understand, to dig into some of the complexity, to think about the ways forward. And as my colleague Michelle Egan said, our goal for today was really to keep the conversation on the space of moving forward. And so I know we just have a moment left, but in that last moment, and especially in honor of the fact, or in acknowledging that today is International Women's Day, I would invite you to perhaps end on a positive note of what advice do you have for all the people on this call who are looking to you as a woman in the national security space, a woman who, as Dean Shannon Hayter acknowledged, has received so many accolades. So how do younger women find their voice, find their way?
Well, first, I want just to thank everybody that we're here together. We're here together, that you have shown interest and you were willing to hear from Ukraine, to hear about Ukraine, and to show your solidarity. And I'm really, really grateful. And it's not taken for granted in Ukraine. Every voice, every question, it all matters, because it makes us heard louder, clearer, and that gives a lot of inspiration to us. So I want to thank you all. I think that every person is unique, but probably some things I learned from my life is that the best way to take a right decision is to hear yourself, to be frank to yourself, and do not put yourself in a trap where you think that you have to make only one choice. You have to try everything and choose from what has worked out for you, based on your emotions, based on your feeling. And now, when we are in such a terrible conditions, things are so white and black, and you understand that you have only one life to live. You have only one ability to succeed, is to hear yourself, to stand with yourself, to cherish those who love you, to be frank to yourself and to those who love you. And if there's something you really were not able to say or do, just do it and move on if it's not working, and move on anyway, even if it's working. So I really dream that none of you would ever be able to find yourself in a situation we found ourselves, but just listen to our voices. They are very, very loud, because we have seen how the life could end within one night, how something you had building for decades could really stop the exist. And you understand what is really important, what matters. And matters is the happiness of those you love. And what matters, in fact, that they know what you feel and they know what you can. So do not hesitate, just act. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And Dean Hayter, I think I saw your hand a moment ago. Did you want to make a comment as we close?
No, I was looking for the emojis to applaud the brilliant comments and advice there, and I clicked the wrong one.
Okay, well, we'll just use that as.
I also have the emoji. I just
exactly
thought
the
how
heart.
it came fun.
So before we all applaud and thank you, Deputy Prime Minister, I will just note again that we have a fantastic array of photographs of Ukraine, co-organized with Fulbright. So for anybody on campus today, please walk through the atrium and check those out. And Deputy Prime Minister, when we are able to host you on campus, which we've so much look forward to doing based on your schedule and availability, we are going to have those photographs spread throughout the building and on continued display. And so we'll look forward to sharing those with you and showing you those when you are able to come to the School of International Service. So on behalf of the Department of Foreign Policy and Global Security, on behalf of the Department of Politics, Governance, and Economics, the Transatlantic Policy Center, the School of International Service, everybody who joined this call and who benefited so much from hearing your thoughts and your remarks and just in seeing what you bring to this. Thank you so very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you all for making so much effort to organize this discussion. I'm looking forward to see you in person, and thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.